By early 1991, the United States and its international coalition had achieved what many described as a swift and decisive military victory in the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait had been reversed, his forces pushed back across the border in a matter of weeks. The world watched as modern warfare played out on television screens with precision strikes and overwhelming firepower. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent triumph lay the seeds of deep and lasting resentment that would shape politics across the Middle East for decades to come. Encouraged by Western messages calling for internal revolt, many Iraqis rose up against Saddam's regime. For a brief moment, it seemed like his iron grip might finally break, but what followed instead was a story of encouragement, abandonment, brutal repression, and long-term suffering, a chapter that continues to influence regional distrust toward foreign interventions even today. The ground phase of the operation lasted only about 100 hours, one of the fastest major military campaigns in modern history. Iraqi troops, demoralized and outmatched by superior technology and numbers, fled northward in complete disarray. What became known as the Highway of Death showed rows upon rows of burned-out tanks, trucks, and vehicles stretching for miles, a powerful symbol of the coalition's dominance. The international force, led by the United States under President George H.W. Bush, deliberately chose not to advance all the way to Baghdad. The official mandate was clear: liberate Kuwait and restore its sovereignty, but avoid a full-scale occupation or regime change that could destabilize the entire region. Many observers at the time, both inside and outside Iraq, expected that the defeat would naturally lead to Saddam's downfall. Bush himself had publicly called on the Iraqi people to rise up and take matters into their own hands. These words were broadcast widely, raising hopes among opposition groups that external support might follow. However, once the ceasefire was declared, the coalition forces held their positions, leaving the internal dynamics of Iraq to play out without direct military intervention from the outside. Almost immediately after the guns fell silent in late February and early March 1991, widespread rebellions erupted across Iraq. In the Shia-majority south, particularly in important religious centers like Basra, Najaf, and Karbala, local populations took to the streets and seized control of key areas. These uprisings drew on deep-seated grievances against Saddam's Ba'athist regime, which had long suppressed Shia religious and political expression. At the same time, in the Kurdish north, long-oppressed Kurdish groups mobilized rapidly, capturing towns and declaring autonomy in regions they had fought for over many years. For several tense weeks, Saddam's forces appeared vulnerable. Rebel fighters even managed to capture tanks and government buildings in some locations. Reports from the period suggested that parts of Saddam's inner circle were nervous, and the regime's control seemed to be slipping away in multiple provinces simultaneously. The rebels believed that the international community, having just defeated Saddam's army in Kuwait, would at least provide some form of protection or support while the regime was weak. This period represented a rare moment of hope for those who had suffered under decades of dictatorship, but that hope would soon turn into profound disappointment. With his back against the wall, Saddam Hussein responded with ferocious speed and brutality. He redeployed his most loyal elite units, the Republican Guard, which had largely been kept in reserve during the Kuwait fighting. These forces moved south and north with overwhelming firepower, crushing the rebellions through mass executions, artillery shelling of civilian areas, and systematic destruction of opposition strongholds. In the south, Shia holy sites suffered significant damage, and entire communities, including the ancient Marsh Arabs, saw their wetlands drained and villages devastated as punishment. In the Kurdish north, hundreds of thousands of civilians fled toward the borders with Turkey and Iran, creating one of the largest refugee crises of the era. The scale of the violence was shocking even by the standards of Saddam's regime. Many analysts later criticized the United States and the coalition for encouraging these revolts through radio broadcasts and public statements, only to stand back once the fighting intensified. The fear of a power vacuum, potential Iranian influence in the Shia south, or a fragmented Iraq appears to have influenced the decision not to intervene more directly. This perceived abandonment became a defining narrative of betrayal in the collective memory of many in the region. In the aftermath, the international community eventually established no-fly zones to provide some protection for civilians in the north and south. However, the broader UN sanctions regime remained firmly in place for more than a decade. These comprehensive economic measures severely restricted Iraq's ability to import food, medicine, and essential supplies, leading to widespread hardship among ordinary citizens. Reports from international organizations documented sharp increases in child mortality rates due to malnutrition and lack of medical care. Saddam's government, though weakened, survived the immediate threat and cleverly used the sanctions as propaganda, portraying Iraq as a victim of Western aggression. This period of suffering, combined with the memory of the abandoned uprisings, helped solidify anti-Western sentiment across large parts of the Middle East and beyond. It created a powerful story that external powers were willing to use local populations for their strategic goals but unwilling to follow through when the costs became complicated. The events of 1991 left deep scars. The uprisings and their violent suppression hardened sectarian divisions within Iraq that would explode again after the 2003 invasion. On a wider scale, the episode contributed to a lasting skepticism toward Western promises of support for democratic or opposition movements in the region. Many observers argue that this chapter helps explain ongoing tensions, from debates about foreign interventions to persistent distrust in international diplomacy. The Gulf War aftermath remains a crucial case study in how short-term military decisions can have profound long-term political and human consequences. What do you think? Was the choice to stop short of Baghdad and withhold support from the rebels a strategic mistake with lasting consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this detailed historical breakdown valuable, please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for the next episode in our History of the Middle East series.